I would like to talk today about the Malahide walled garden in Malahide Castle during the 1950s. That was the time when I was young, so I remember it pretty well. It was a garden that produced vegetables, fruit, apples, blackcurrants, raspberries, strawberries, greenhouses as well, where there was beautiful pears and plums and peaches. Now, there was very, very nice peaches, which were a real treat for us if we ever got our hands on it. However, the thing about the walled garden was, in my day, it was sort of a place that's forbidden unless you were invited in. Actually, when I was a bit older, I used to climb over the wall at night sometimes and rob the apples. Now, it wasn't a very hard job because there was nobody around at night at all. But the big problem was scaling the wall. But we had ways of climbing up on bits of trees and jumping over the wall. Now, the chief gardener was a Mr. Williams. He was a gruff sort of old man. And he didn't live on the Malahide estate, he lived in Concealy Lane. In the summer, we would be employed to pick fruit in the garden. And we would get 2 old pence for a punnet. Now, if it was strawberries, it was grand, because strawberries were big, you'd fill them quite quickly. But if it was blackcurrants, which it often was, blackcurrants are very small, and he didn't allow them to come in sprays. You had to actually pick each one separately. It took ages to fill a punnet of blackcurrants, so we used to hate that. As I say, he was a gruff man, but he was a very fair man. And sometimes he used to have little bars of chocolate with him, I remember, and he might give you a square of chocolate. Not very often, but fair play to him. But he then had 2 well-known assistants to us anyway at the time, Mr. Polly and Charlie Byrne. But Mr. Polly lived just on the corner of the garden, along the avenue, the corner garden, so halfway up towards the castle. His house can still be seen, particularly from the garden itself. But from the avenue, they have a hoarding up around it now because it's vacant and it looks as if it's decaying away, really, but it's a terrible pity. But that was Mr. Polly's house. Now, interesting thing about Mr. Polly and Mrs. Polly, they lived there when I was young, and they had these dogs. Now, one of them I remember still was called Sally. They were some sort of a terriers, but they were a terrier as far as I was concerned. I used to hate having to go up past them because they always came out barking, and they probably wouldn't bite you, but I wasn't too sure about that. But so every time we were going up past them, you'd come up slowly, and then the dog would come, and then you'd race past and up, on up. And Mrs. Polly used to just laugh at us because obviously she loved her dogs and she didn't think they'd do any harm. But as far as we're concerned, they were the enemy. Now, Charlie Byrne was an interesting character too. Charlie lived at Auburn, over at the Auburn Lodge there, and that's where Charlie lived. And he always seemed an old man to me, but because he was bald. But he may not have been all that old. He was a very nice man, very mannerly, very, very polite. And his son was a carpenter, and he worked for Bizets and served his time in Bizets. A very, very good carpenter. And he's, to my best of my knowledge, he's still alive and lives in Inverleith today. Now, there's a doorway into the garden. It's still there today, but it was the main entrance into the garden at the time. There was a bell on the outside, a pull bell. You had to pull it, and the bell rang, and one of the gardeners, if they were near hand, would let you in. And so in you went. And on the left-hand side, then, there was a little potting shed, but it also had a bit of a desk in it. So it was like Mr. Williams' office, if you could call it that. The tower also now in the garden. The tower was an interesting place. In my day, I never knew what it was really for originally, but they used to store the apples in it. You know, they would preserve the apples, like keep them. But on the tower, of course, there was the bell. Now, a bell in those days was a very important thing because they rang it at 8 o'clock in the morning for the men to start work. This was not just the gardeners, but the farmhands as well. 8 o'clock, 12 o'clock, go off for lunch. 1 o'clock, come back for lunch. 6 o'clock, go home. And that was it. And because people didn't carry watches were a very expensive thing, and they only came later on. And obviously, also, the point was that watches could get broken easily and things like that because they were valuable devices in those days. So people didn't, they just went by the bell. And now that bell actually is still in the tower today because I looked at it and there's a chain coming from it. I don't know whether it's working because I can't reach up to the chain, but it looks the same as it did 60 years ago to me, 70 years ago nearly. It was mainly the 50s, I remember, because when you're young like that, the things stick in your mind more. And the people, everybody, you'd know all the people, because we used to be up around the woods playing around and things like that, and you'd see these people coming and going, and we got to know them all. But that was the walled garden.